Howdy folks, so just to pick up where we left off, in the last session we covered entering our plans into Cinema 4D and basic blocking so that we can get an idea of scale. Now the next stage is going to be blocking the actual structure, so by the end of this video we should have something that is starting to vaguely represent a building. So yeah, let's move on to blocking out. The first step when you want to block out any model, which you're possibly already aware of, is you need to start from big to small. Yeah, so you go from the big elements, so using this photo as an example, this would be a medium element, the chimney would be a big element, I don't know, that would be a small element. So it's quite important to know where you would categorize the various aspects of a project before you get in. This is purely so you have an order of operation. If you start with the smallest bits, if I started with this and then later on I find, oh well, actually this pillar here, I need to add this, oh but this doesn't fit on that pillar, I'm going to have problems. It's easiest to start from the ground up, which is, you know, it's pretty logical if you think about how construction works in the real world. 3D works along the same lines. So when it comes to blocking out the structure, the first thing that I reckon we're going to need to cover is, as I mentioned, the chimney. So you've got the stack here, and then you've got these pillars which I've previously mentioned. I would say these are the most fundamental elements, because bear in mind, for this project we don't care about the back of the building, we're only doing the facade. All we want is to get a nice render from the front of this building. If this is popular, then I will by all means do the rear and I'll do the interior, which I've got to do anyway, but for now we're only focusing on the front. So let's have a look at some other references. That's tiny. This bay window, which appears in the plans, and you will see this in the plans, we are not going to include this. The reason for that is it's actually a later addition. So this was built in 1877. We're trying to represent the building as it appeared here. This is an earlier photo, I think this is 1860, and we're trying to represent how it would have looked in 1820. So this is always going to be part of doing historical buildings. You always need to do a bit of recon. So for the sake of the plan, we're going to completely be ignoring this. We're going to be drawing it flat, like for the first and second floors. Apart from that though, we're not really going to be doing any deviation. We're going to stick to the references pretty close. As I say, you do have all of these in the link below the video, so yeah, if you're following along you've got everything you need. So jumping into Cinema 4D, we're going to make a start with the chimney. So the chimney stack that goes up here. This is going to be a good indication of how big that chimney stack's going to be. So let's get a cube. Everybody loves cubes, and we need to remember that this house on this side will have an equal share, and then let's say a couple of foot of brickwork between it. So we're going to need to pull him out like that. Make sure the central axis is slightly, yeah, it's in the middle of the wall. Let's agree it's in the middle of the wall. So we've got our basic dimension there. And then when we go to the front, this is where we need to look at our reference. So it's difficult to see, but this stack is probably getting on for 2.5 meters, maybe 3 meters. Yeah, let's say it's 3 meters above the apex that it reaches here. But back to the stack, let's just pull that out to an arbitrary kind of height. It needs to be a lot higher than that. So I would actually say it's getting on for that. Yeah, I would actually say it's getting on for that kind of height. So as before, we can check this. 2 meters. Yeah. So again, it doesn't have to be exact. We're just blocking this out so we have something vaguely resembling a building. Okay, so that's our chimney stack. At this point, I would just like to flag that if you're not already doing it, name your things. Just a quick tip, you know, if you're new to the program. If you're not new to the program, you very well know this. Moving back in, we've got our stack here. So what was the next element we agreed? Well, we agreed that we're going to do these pillars. So let's throw a couple more cubes in. Instantly, I can predict a problem, but I'm going to do it anyway, just for the sake of demonstration. Okay, so obviously on this backdrop plan we do have a vague estimation of where this comes out to. So it looks like we have a change in the cornice here, which means that we can estimate that the line kind of goes through here. So you want it about there. Yeah, so that's following the plan. I feel like that's too small. I feel like it isn't to scale in that plan, and it isn't really shown in these references either. You've got a little bit there, but I think it's debatable whether that's the same thing. So we're going to have to guess this to an extent. So the way I would do it is you can very easily just eyeball this. So if that's a standard size door, that's getting on for the width of the door. The width of the door is, I don't know, a meter. A front door like this. So let's make it a meter. Okay, and for the first time, you're going to see me be ever so technical and enter it, which I really should do more. And just to adjust the top and bottom, I'm going to make that editable. I'm going to turn off only select visible elements. I'm going to select the top and the bottom. I'm just going to scale it like that, just because it's easier. Don't worry if it goes under slightly, that really isn't a concern. I mean, yeah, I'm going to fix that, but you don't need to worry about that normally. Okay, so let's copy that over. So it's at this point I'm starting to feel a bit cramped. Yeah, oh yeah, and we need to do it in this axis. So I mean, it's not much. You're talking a brick's width that it's coming out. Yeah, I honestly I think that's fine. So I'm starting to feel a bit cramped here, and it's because 2 panels just isn't enough. So I'm going to go back to the default, which is 4, and I'm going to make this one perspective. We're going to go into that, and we're going to look at what we have. Okay, so we're far from having a house here, but this may seem like a bit of a jump ahead, and I'll explain why I'm doing it in a minute. But we're going to add a camera. Okay, we're going to match that view, and we're going to try and get our final render view. So let's just try and get this right. So let's turn off only select visible elements. Really easy mistake. Make sure you are on top of whether this is on or off, because you'll be selecting stuff. You'll go into points mode. I'm going to elucidate this because it's a really valid point. If you forget about this and you leave it off, and you've got a complicated mesh and you've got stuff over here, behind here in the mesh, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to mess up hours of work. The simple reason is, quite obviously, this tells you whether or not you're selecting things that you can see, or everything that's beyond the mouse cursor. Okay, this is very basic, but it's amazing how often I get caught out by this still. And honestly, I think if you meet a professional who says they don't get caught out by it, sometimes they're not entirely telling the truth. So back to it. Yeah, we need to have our view. So let's open up our view. Actually, for the sake of the tutorial, I will open it on the same window. So we have a bit of a angle here, and I think it's more of an angle than it looks. I'm not convinced this is a long lens. I reckon this was taken at a pretty standard focal length. I might be wrong. Obviously there's no way of knowing, but the way that the perspective looks here and the compression, it looks pretty wide. So our first step with that, and I'm going to move that back over there, our first step with that is to make a camera. So let's just make a camera. This is where the tutorial will start to differ slightly for people not using VRAY. If you're not using VRAY, all you need to do is you need to go into the camera, you need to move it around, you need to get it to where you want it, and then you just go in here and you find your focal length. So I don't know, I reckon it's quite low, possibly not that low. Okay, so important to point out, these edges are straight. Well, actually no, this one has a slight camber to it, but this one is straight. So if we can make that edge straight and that one pop out a little, which, you know, seems to be happening, so this is fine. If you're using VRAY, which I am going to be using VRAY for this project, so I will be using a VRAY camera, you want to go down to VRAY bridge tags and you need to make this a physical camera. This changes nothing, okay? If you're new to VRAY, all the physical camera tag does, it doesn't make it a physical camera. So I know in default Cinema 4D, obviously physical means something quite different to standard. In VRAY, it literally means it's just a standard camera. You're not going to use a different type of camera for a standard still. So still camera, blah blah blah, and we're pretty much there, because the VRAY camera will use the basic components of the camera. So the focal length, you know, it's still being used. The focal distance is still being used. The object, the white balance is a bit tricky, but we'll get onto that later. Most of these are still being used in the VRAY camera. Okay. That applies for the object tab, less so the other tabs, but we're focusing on object for now just to make life easier. So, camera aside, let's wrangle this into a tighter position. So you see I'm also trying to line it up so that there's enough clearance here and enough clearance here, so the two extreme angles of the photo, that's what we want to focus on. So it's quite a lot of clearance, so I'm actually going to put it there. Without being here all day, I think that's pretty close. The problem that I often come across is these old cameras have a lot of distortion, and it can completely throw you off what you're doing. So I find that it's easiest just to get an approximation, and then right at the end, when you're ready to render, then you can kind of fiddle and you can be like, okay, well this doesn't look right, because at the moment we have no windows, we have no neighbours, we have no reference points, there's nothing we can use to anchor this. So I'm going to leave the camera there for now, and this is the first time I'm going to use one of these buttons. So this is the protection tag. You won't have this quite so convenient, I'm afraid. The reason I've got it up here is I'm running a script. Usually, if you're running an earlier version of Cinema, earlier than R21, I believe, it will be in a Cinema 4D tag menu, which is normally here, and it will be called protection. Okay. If you're in R21 or a newer version, you're going to have to go down to rigging, because they've moved it about, and go down to protection. Okay. It's important to note that protection will not stop you from fiddling in here. You can still fiddle about with this to your heart's content, and it's going to have consequence. What protection does, and the reason it's in the rigging menu, is it just prevents any kind of movement. You cannot move this object. You can't alter it in space at all. I'll just demonstrate this. So blah blah blah. Okay. Oh, I've lost my beautiful angle. View, undo view. View, undo view. Okay, and it's surprising how few tutorials actually include that tip. But getting back in, we're going to throw our protection on to avoid exactly that from happening. We're going to move the camera down here. I tend to have the camera down at the bottom, and then lighting, and then environment, and then the model, just for the sake of organization. I would encourage you to have a similar system if you don't already. So that's the camera sorted. Next on the list, so we have the pillars. So yeah, these pillars aren't quite enough, are they? So let's just bring you out a little bit. Let's have a look. Okay, I think that's 2 bricks width. This kind of thing you can eyeball, because honestly, unless somebody actually lived there in real life, they're not going to know. And if it looks right to the photos, then it's going to look right. I know it sounds like a cop-out, but as I've said numerous times, there's no way you can get this spot on. You can come close, you can use approximation. How wide is a brick? Let's times that brick by 2. Let's see how wide this is. And then you can draw a knife around here, and you can then measure the distance between these 2 edges. Oh, it's 33 centimeters. But you're never going to model anything. You know, you need to have a balance between making this spot on and actually getting the model out, because this kind of recon takes so much time. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to make it that thick. If something later on proves to me that I'm wrong, I will change it. And this it is honestly the best way to work with this kind of project. Moving on, we have this lip here, but that would be small. Yeah, so that is the facade. I'm going to start with the roof ridges. So this would also be considered a large part of the building. This is the only reference we have demonstrating this. Okay, so what I think I'm going to have to do is bring that in. So we're going to go middle mouse button. We're not going to fiddle with panels again. We're just going to find which one represents that angle, and it's not going to be front, is it? So yeah, this represents that angle. So let's bring it in using the same techniques we did in the last lesson. Tiny. So we need to make it massive. I apologise in advance for my voice today. I think I've got a bit of a cold on the way. So yeah, this bit of facade, this cap, if you will, this is of course how we measured the front of our building. And if we go back to our perspective view, because remember in Cinema 4D, viewports retain their customization. So I've got a back on this viewport which is still there, but it's perspective, and remember perspective can't show back view. So we just need to go back to front. We need to go to wireframe so we can see what's happening, and it ends about here. So let's go, just in case you missed that, I press KL, so that gets you the loop knife tool. Really helpful tool. It's like the slice tool in 3ds Max, if anyone's coming from 3ds. Yeah, really helpful tool. So I'm gonna say it is about, yeah, let's say there, above the crown bricks. So, okay, why have we just done that? Well, we have just done that so that we can do this. We can now scale this, and we know exactly where we should put that piece of wall. Okay, so obviously this will take a bit more fiddling than that, but we're pretty spot on already, I think. So we found a discrepancy in the plans. No matter how I wrangle this, this isn't being represented correctly, because I know this is correct from the front plan, but now the side plan is telling me something different. You'll come across this quite a lot in hand-drawn sketches. I'm not sure why, because they would have used measurements to produce it. All I know is this is a thing. So what we need to do is we need to just make a guesstimation. So that's the front of the house. The back of the house is lined up. Let's get the basement floor lined up properly and how it should be. And we're going to have to turn off keep aspect ratio because we need to skew this now. So let's just change that so that it's more closely fitting what our other two plans corroborate. And it very much is the needs of the many in this case. The fact that two references counter this reference, I'm just going to ignore this reference. So, okay, that's good. We've got a side reference for the roofing. I'd say that's pretty spot on. The first thing we want to do is we want to go back into perspective, and we need to just get rid of these, not those, but these, gone. Okay, so that is very much now a facade. Don't worry about depth yet. We're going to get into depth in the next video. All you're worrying about now is that roofing. So this is a bit of a cheat, but I don't care because it works. So we're going to select these two sides. You're going to press Control, and you're going to lift that up. Doesn't matter how high. Well, actually, it does matter how high. Do it roughly to the max peak of the ceiling, just to make your life easier. Again, we're not worrying about depth, just ignore this. Imagine you're just doing the paper thin coating of the building for now, because that is all we're doing. This complicates things. I'm inclined to say this is a much later addition though, because it looks like a roof conservatory. I'm going to remove this. We are going to just make a normal pitched roof, because there is also a chimney stack here, so we're never going to see that. This is a pointless thing to model and a pointless thing to worry about. So let's go to knife loop again. I always forget what it's called. Let's start at the point. Let's cut there. Let's cut there. So whenever doing a cut like this, what you need to do is you need to not only get the peaks, you also need to get the troughs. So for the sake of doing that, trough, 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 and now let's ignore that one for now. Now we can do that operation. Okay, so don't worry about welding it down yet. Let's just get the angle right. So that front one's looking pretty close. I'm not going to touch that. This one isn't, because we have, so don't forget we've scaled this wrong. We've constrained it incorrectly, which means that this isn't going to make sense, but it's still good for a guide. And yeah. So moving over here, let's just bring you down. Let's just bring you over. So you go like that, you go like that, and yeah, that's looking pretty tight. So okay, that's, you know, it's not perfect, but it is definitely blocked out. Okay, so yeah, if you just want to close this, if your OCD is driving you nuts, just go MB over to there. I say that because I know mine definitely was. If we go over here, we are going to give the walls thickness, so I'm not actually going to fiddle with that yet. But as you can see, we do have the foundations of something that vaguely resembles a building. So in the next one, what we're going to do, oh, I almost forgot, you need to move this stack over because it's a terrace house, so it's going to have a stack on both sides. So let's just line it up. Let's see where the center is. It's slightly off center. Let's just do the same over here, and yeah, we have a stack. So it's important at this point to just go back to the reference quickly. So we've obviously dropped the ball on something here, and I think it might be the roof angle on the larger peak. Actually, no, I don't think we have. I reckon that's the camera angle. So let's go into camera again. Let's get rid of our protection tag. So maybe it is more compressed than I initially thought. Obviously we don't want to do that, that's underground. We are going to get back into the camera later. This isn't the last time I'm covering it, so don't worry about that. Yeah, so now once I put thickness on the roof, we'll be able to see a bit of it like we can in the photo. So that's fine. That's, I'd say, a lot closer than it was. Yeah, so this is looking a perfectly acceptable introduction to where we're going with this building. So in the next tutorial, we are going to be moving on to the slightly smaller aspects. We're going to try adding the door in, we're going to add in the roof itself, we're going to add in the cornices around here, and yeah, so I look forward to seeing you there.